Shri Gurubhyo Namah Harihi Om Dhyayamo Dhavalavagunthanavatim Tejomayim Naishtikim Snigdhapangavilokinim Bhagavatim Mandasmitashrimukhim Vatsalyamritavarshinim Sumadhuram Sankirtanalapinim Syamangim Madhusikta Suktim Amritanandatmikam Ishwarim Om Amriteshwaryai Namah Om Amriteshwaryai Namah Om Amriteshwaryai Namah. Om Amriteshwaryai Namah. Being a Friday, let us continue our discussion on Bhaja Govindam. And so far, we have discussed 18 verses, and then we'll discuss the 19th verse today, as we have done it in the previous sessions. Let us begin with quickly recapping a quick recap over all the verses that we have discussed till now, so that we are with the flow of our discussion. The first verse about the technicalities, the complexities of life that we define. Let us try to break through that and make life a simple process and dedicate ourselves to the higher goal. First verse. Second verse about letting go of greed, the tendency to accumulate. Wealth is not going to give us the ultimate happiness. Third one about the physical appearance, our fixation on that. Even that is not permanent in nature, so go beyond. The third verse. Fourth verse, overall about life, how life is unpredictable in nature and we should be prepared for whatever be the development that happens as part of life. Fifth one is about how we would have a lot of following, we would get praised for all the abilities that we have and all the wealth that we have, but once that depletes, even the amount of following would depreciate. Sixth one, as long as we have life in this body, people would remember us with all good intentions. But as life ceases to exist, it's very natural, we will get forgotten. So understand the impermanence there too. Seventh verse, how we are obsessed with so many various things in various stages of our life. Least do we invest our faculty onto pondering on the ultimate reality, the unchanging truth. So that's what the seventh verse talks about. The eighth one is about raising the question, who am I? With respect to all the relationship that I have, all the bonds that I have, that I identify myself with, who am I really? If I try to go beyond these, is the question we need to find the answer for. That's what spiritual quest is all about. Ninth verse, once we try to find the answer and we try to grow spiritually, what is the starting point? Good company, right company. And through right company or good company, satsanga, we develop detachment. Through that, we overcome delusion, and that is what will open the doorway onto liberation. The 10th verse is again a reminder of how the various things that we consider significant in various phases of our life, at later point of time, they no more remain significant. So again, understand all that we unnecessarily invest upon the impermanent things are going to go in vain at some point of time. 11th one is about just no point in taking pride in these things that are impermanent in nature. They would be significant now. We take a lot of pride in it. Later point of time, they are no more going to be significant. So why take pride in them? The 12th verse is about how life shoots at us experiences of two kinds, dual in nature, pleasant and unpleasant. The more we get carried away by the emotion of that moment, the more we struggle with life. So let's try to remain in the middle path. The 13th one again underscores the importance of good company, and in this context we discussed about the company of the Mahatma, a realized master, a Sadguru. How that is the only way, that is the only thing that would take us across the ocean of transmigration, the ocean of the complexity of life. 14th one about spiritual growth. Outwardly growth, outward show off is not going to help us, neither is it going to help anyone else. We need to grow from within, and that natural growth is what will benefit us and benefit others too. The 15th verse and the 15th and the 16th were about how though we become weak, though we lose our abilities, though we may not be as in best shape as we would be as when we are young, though we grow old and we lose most of our abilities, still we don't let go of desires. So 15th and 16th were about reminding us about how strong the hook of desire is that hooks us up with itself. The 17th one is about austerities and rituals. They are significant, but as we grow spiritually, we need to go beyond them, not get tied up by them. And the 18th verse, which we discussed the last week, was about dispassion. Once we have dispassion, whatever be the situation that we are in life, be it good or bad, be it pleasant or unpleasant, dispassion never fails to bring happiness in life. If we develop dispassion, we would ever remain happy and content, is what we discussed the last week. So it was about happiness that we discussed the last week. So today, the 19th verse, we'll continue with the topic of happiness, the true happiness or joy. So we discussed last week about happiness, how happiness is the very common basis of everything we try to do, right? We all want to be happy. And we search for happiness in everything. We were talking about how even when we go into spiritual life, we are even there, we are in search of true happiness, right? And second one we discussed about was how what was the second point? That happiness is a state of mind. It's a decision that we make. Rather than something we get from people or things outside, happiness is something that comes from within based on a conviction that we have from within. The third one is, it was about how happiness is not defined by how much we have accumulated. Rather, it is defined by how less we crave for more and more. So less we crave for more and more, that is when we are most happy, irrespective of how much we have already accumulated, right? So we discussed these 3 points overall, the gist of the various points that we discussed the last week. These were the 3 points that kind of highlight the discussion we had the last week. So keeping that in our mind, let's move on to the 19th verse, which goes as Yogarato va bhogarato va sangarato va sangavihina yasya brahmani ramate chittam nandati nandati nandatyeva. So let's pronounce the words one by one first and then look into the meaning. Please respond twice after I pronounce each of the words. Yogarat. It is actually yogarata, but because of the following word, it becomes yogarato. So please pronounce after me. Yogarato. 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 Va. 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 So A with a bar. Had the bar not been there, it would be va. Because there is a bar, it is va. Bhogarato. BH. So bha. Bhogarato. 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 Va. 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 Yogarato va. Bhogarato va. The first line. The second line is Sangarato. 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 Va. 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 Sanga. 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 Vihina. And the first I doesn't have a bar over it. The second I has a bar over it. So Vihina. If both of them had a bar, it would be Vihina. None of them had a bar, it would be Vihina. In this case, only the second I has a bar. So Vihina. Please respond twice. Vihina. Vihina. Sangarato va. Sanga vihina. The second line. The third one. Yasya. 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 Brahmani. 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 I usually mention it every time we come across this term. Though it is HM, we pronounce it as MH. Brahmani. Brahmani. And the N had a bar, dot below, so rolling your tongue up. Na. Brahmani. Ramate. 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 Chittam. There are two T's. So chittam. Had there been one T, it would be chittam. Because it is two, it is chittam. 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 Yasya brahmani ramate chittam. Then fourth line is nandati. 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 The same word three times. Nandati, 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 eva. The third time, because nandati and eva come together, it would become nandatyeva. 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 So nandati, nandati, nandatyeva is the fourth line. So the verse is Yogaratova, Bhogaratova, Sangaratova, Sangavihina. Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chittam Nandati, Nandati, Nandatyeva. So let's sing it, chant it in tune twice. If you are familiar, please do join me the first time itself, else wait for the second time and we chant it. So together. Yogarato va, bhogarato va, sangarato va, sanga vihina, yasya brahmani ramate chittam nandati, nandati, nandatyeva. Once more. Yogarato va, bhogarato va, sangarato va, sanga vihina, yasya brahmani ramate chittam nandati, nandati, nandatyeva. So what is said here? Yogaratah, bhogaratah, sangaratah, sangavihina. Four terms used here. And then it says va, va, va. Va is like or, or. So whether it is yoga, yogaratah, or being bhogaratah, or being sangaratah, or being sangavihina. And what are these four terms? Yogaratah, yoga, a high spiritual state. Yogaratah, to revel or to be in that state. So, yogaratah, one who is in a high spiritual state. Be it that, or bhogaratova, one who is in materialism. So be it in high spiritual state, or right the opposite, be it in materialistic state. And the other combination is sangarata. Sangarata, sangha, company. And so be in company, sangarata. Or sangha vihina. Sangha, again company, vihina, devoid. So whether you are in company or otherwise devoid of company. So whether you are in high spiritual state or right opposite in materialistic state, or whether you are in company, good or bad, whatever be it, in company or otherwise right the opposite, in lack of company or in seclusion. Yasya, one whose chittam, one whose mind, ramate, roams around or is fixated or revels, where brahmani, brahman, brahma, brahmani, in brahman, in the supreme. So one whose mind revels in the supreme would what? Would experience what? Or would do what? Nandati, would rejoice. Would nandati, would rejoice. Nandati, would rejoice. Eva, verily. So would rejoice, rejoice, and verily rejoice. Or would rejoice, rejoice, and only rejoice. So irrespective of whatever be the situation we are in, we would ever be rejoiceful, is what this verse is pointing out. To summarize, whatever be the situation we are in, whatever be the condition we are in, summarize. Whatever be the condition or situation we are in, whether we are in real high meditative state or we are in, a high feeling or a fervor of devotion as we are singing bhajan, that is one kind of experience. Or otherwise we are in a party or in a situation that we are not very happy with otherwise, or we are in a situation, an awkward situation, whatever be it. So yoga, bhoga, whether we are really in a high spiritual state or we are in a materialistic state or we are in a conducive state or otherwise. Sangaratova, whether we are with a lot of people, in company, or whether we are in seclusion with no one around. Just pointing out two examples. I mean, these are two examples of telling whatever extremes we be in. Because we discussed about happiness previously in the last verse and in the few verses before. Happiness is where we don't get pulled away by the emotion of the situation. Rather, we remain in middle. And this verse is more or less talking about how do we remain in middle. What does it say? Yasya chittam brahmani ramate. Yasya brahmani ramate chittam. So one whose chittam, yasya chittam ramate brahmani, is ever, it revels in the supreme truth, would only rejoice, rejoice, and only rejoice. So that's what this verse is talking about. And if you remember the daily webcast that happens from Amritapuri, Amma did have the ashram residents talk about this very verse. She wanted people to share their thoughts. And along with this verse, Amma had one other verse. They were connected to each other, or Amma connected them together and then wanted people to talk about. And that particular verse was from the Ishavasya Upanishad. The verse goes as Andham tamah pravishanti ye avidyamupasate tato bhuya ivate tamo ya u vidyayam ratah. Yau vidyayam ratah. Andham tamah pravishanti ye vidyam upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yau vidyayam ratah. The gist of the verse, it says, Andham tamah pravishanti. Andham tamah, the dark ignorance, or the blinded darkness, to literally put it. Andham tamah, the blinded darkness, pravishanti, one enters into, or those would enter into, ye, those who, avidyam upasate. Avidya, ignorance. Let's discuss it as ignorance. We'll discuss further about it. Ignorance, upasate, one who go after, or one who are dedicated to what? Avidya. One who are dedicated to ignorance, they enter blinded darkness. And tato bhuya ivate tamo. Even those would enter a bigger amount of darkness. Who? The second type, yau vidyayam rata. Those, but who are dedicated to vidya. Those who are dedicated to knowledge. So, the gist of the verse, it says, those who subscribe to avidya, ignorance, enter darkness, which is kind of obvious based on what we discuss. But the second part says, those who subscribe to vidya, knowledge, they enter a bigger form of darkness. We'll not go too deep into it, because this discussion leads to this particular verse that we are discussing today as part of Bhaja Govindam. So there are two categories here, avidya and vidya. The first part talks about avidya, the second part talks about vidya. And if you remember the various discussions we had, the discussions they had in Amritapuri, those people who spoke about this very particular topic, they were equating avidya as actions that are performed without knowledge, which is obvious. They were also talking about rituals that are being performed without understanding. Those who just do it mechanically without the right understanding. All these would lead into darkness, is what the argument was when various people spoke about. They talked about in various aspects of the same thing. So basically, rituals which are just blindly done. I'm going to do archana today so that God will be happy and I'll get $100 or some such. Or I'll, it's a typical thing in certain temples or with certain people, they would say, oh God, I'll bring 100 coconuts and break it in the temple. Please help me pass this exam, or please help me win this lottery. It's like a business. It's a ritual without the right understanding. Not that because God was pleased because we broke 100 coconuts that we would get something else. So that's lack of understanding. Those rituals have a significance, that which we understand and then do it, that ritual will be all the more fruitful or all the more meaningful as we perform it. So rituals or anything that we do without understanding, they will lead us to darkness, is what the first part says. The second part is vidya. Vidya, as the various monks and residents in Amritapuri discussed, vidya is scriptural knowledge. So just scriptural knowledge alone, if we just depend on scriptural knowledge alone, like textbook knowledge alone, that will also lead us to darkness. So just sticking to avidya alone, rituals and actions alone, will lead us to darkness, or sticking just to the bookish knowledge, that will also lead us to bigger darkness, is the argument that was put forth by the residents in Amritapuri, talking about the bookish scriptural knowledge. We could always read various books on Bhagavad Gita and various commentaries, we can definitely develop a good sense of idea about it, and we can just give lectures for hours and hours. All of you are looking at me, that's what I'm doing, right? Give lectures for hours and hours. In my case, it's for years and years now. But that's not where we should be limited to. Amma gives the example of how in the olden times we would have these scholars, Sanskrit scholars, who would come and they would talk about the supreme Atman, Brahman, and they would say everything is Brahman and all that. And then Amma says, when it strikes noon, they forget about Brahman. All they think about is food then. If food doesn't arrive, food is not served at noon, they lose their temper. Or when they go to sleep, when they go to bed, the bed is not cozy enough, not comfortable enough, the thought about Brahman is gone. Then it's anger, irritation, gruntling and demanding, scolding, etc. You forget about Brahman then. So that book knowledge is of no use, is what Amma points out to with various examples. So just having the mechanical knowledge, just doing things mechanically, or just having book knowledge, either of them will lead us to darkness. It's like, in case we just learn from YouTube or take some books and learn how to fly an aircraft, we may be able to do that. We may be able to get the various steps. These are the buttons, these are the things. We could very well try to do that, and we may have a good sense of confidence that yes, we could do it because we got it. And we do, it's not just aircraft, we do it with medical field too. We go to webmd.com or we go to nih.gov and look at the various symptoms and we start treating ourselves. Is that good? I'm not sure whether someone who knows the pilot has just learned it from YouTube would want to fly in that airplane, right? On the other side, someone else just doesn't get into an airplane at all, learns everything from a book, learns only from the book and doesn't do anything at all, doesn't look at the practical aspect of it, doesn't look at the training, the practical training given to them, doesn't even look at YouTube wherein you get the practical training or the simulators that we have. They don't do any of those. All they do is just read book and beautifully learn everything, every technical aspect of flying or every technical aspect of medicine. And they go to perform a surgery or they go to fly an airplane. Would you be comfortable as a passenger there? No. Again, both of them will eventually lead to accident, which is what is referred to as darkness here. They will lead us to nowhere, or they will lead us to something that is not going to be fruitful. So either cases would lead us to darkness, is more or less the argument that was made by various people in Amritapuri. And it applies to everyone, not just pilot, not just doctor, be it an engineer, be it a lawyer, be it an orator, be it as a teacher, a professor, everyone. Just either kind of knowledge is not good enough. Just practical part of it alone is not good enough. Just bookish knowledge alone is not good enough. We should have a combination of both. Even for monks, like I mentioned, just reading from book alone is not good enough. Or just doing some service alone is not good enough. A service with understanding or knowledge with practical application is what we need. Now, Amma talks about, or Amma encourages every monk in the ashram. Of course, we have the scriptures that we learn. We learn puja and homas. Amma encourages all of us, especially those who have grown up in the ashram from a young age, to have professional degrees and then learn astrology and learn every of these aspects that helps you grow. At the same time, Amma makes it a point, all the ashram monks have a seva. And seva is not something that you just have as a matter of, I have this particular seva, I just do it and come back. Amma puts you in situation, puts you in real situation, real world situation as part of that seva, wherein you learn the nature of the world. You learn so many things, the good things and the negative things about the world. And once we gather that, and then we amalgamate that along with the knowledge that we have acquired, that wisdom is what will be beneficial to you and beneficial for others. That's the whole idea of the term. We use the term Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudha, we have discussed in Lalita Sahasranama, Om Vasudhayai Namah. Vasudha, earth. Vasudha eva Kutumbakam. Earth is the whole earth is my family. The whole earth is my family. And I dedicate myself I dedicate myself for the whole world, is what you should become like. Amma says, as when we take the vow of becoming a monk, you should dedicate yourself to the world. And you cannot do that just reading some book. Oh, I read this book. Oh, now I want to dedicate myself to the world. We may get the initial idea from reading a book, or we may get inspired from a book or so. But to sustain that, we do need the practical aspect of life too. And that's why, and the sevas that we have, that brahmacharis, and right from the initial times that they have gotten into, it's not just, I'll do some, library seva or some little things. The sevas that the ashram monks get involved in, right from, Amrita University, technical things, or, taking care of ashrams, cleaning of the ashram, building houses for the homeless, going around distributing the various needs, or the things that needy people or poor people around the world would want, where there is a disaster relief effort. You go right into where the tsunami was, where hurricane struck, where earthquake struck, where there was a landslide. You're right there in all these situations, looking at how tough life could be. Be there and you understand, interact with people, be in that situation, and the maturity that you gain as part of that. I feel, as Amma says, that builds you up into an individual who could just beautifully give to others without being an overhead to others. So both kind of knowledge is what we need. And Amma has mentioned to me a few number of times. When we do the scriptural studies, try to understand them from your heart. Don't understand them from your head, rather from your heart. And why do we have to understand it from our heart? So that we translate these actions, we translate what we learn into meaningful actions, so that we can benefit the society. And that way we benefit our own selves. We spread happiness around. So, talking about Vidya and Avidya, I have another interpretation. Had I gotten a chance, I would have spoken just to be a little different from others, because they all spoke about the concept that is on the left side of the screen. I thought of doing it with just another interpretation of the same thing. So here, Avidya and Vidya. When we live in this world, when we say I live in this world, how do I live? I live in terms of my thoughts, I live in terms of what I speak, and I live in terms of what I do. So my thoughts, my speech, and my action. And all these three things could be in two ways. So I can live in two ways. I can either be self-centric through my ego, or otherwise I could be non-self-centric, right? So I can have everything centric upon me, everything revolving around me. Or the second way is to be selfless, wherein I don't think of myself. But, it's so difficult not to have a base on which we dedicate and do things. It's very difficult to just say, you're not given a thing and just you're told think. When you say think about an apple, it's very easy to think, right? You say, oh, sing about rain. It's easy to sing. If the base is not given, you're just told think. Can we think? You're told just sing. It's difficult to sing without a theme or a thing that we base it upon, right? Similarly, when you say, I'm selfish, we have a base. Me, I is the base. My ego is the base. But when we say, I want to be selfless, then what is the base? And without a base, we don't have the natural tendency to function. So what would be the base there? The base would be supreme. The base would be God. So when an action is self-centric, it becomes avidya. It is out of avidya. It will take you to avidya. And when an action is out of supreme-centric, or action is supreme-centric, or God-centric, or divine-centric, that action is out of vidya and will take us to vidya. So that was the point I would have, had I gotten a chance, I would have put forth. So when you say focus on God, we typically focus on Rama, Krishna, Jesus, Buddha, Shiva, Amma. That's how we would make it God-centric, right? And that's how we are doing all this seva that we do selflessly. It's all inspired by Amma, the whole embracing the world effort. The whole worldwide network of embracing the world is inspired by Amma. And Amma says eventually we do have to go beyond even these limited forms. Amma says you have to go beyond the 5 feet Amma and bond with the real Amma. But let's not get to that yet. We'll discuss that in the very end. So we do have that. We do utilize this practice wherein we think of Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Amma, Shiva, Vishnu, and we do actions. And those actions are definitely much more productive, or we have a sense of devotion, we have a sense of humility when we do that. So going with this approach, when we try to understand the Ishavasya Upanishad verse, it says, when we do an action with avidya, when it is out of ego, when it is self-centric, we enter darkness, which makes a lot of sense. But what about the second one, when it is not self-centric, when it is based on a divine thought? How can we enter darkness? Or how can we enter a state of blindedness? We have discussed this analogy before. Let's anyway discuss it again. Darkness is complete lack of knowledge of what is around us. We are in a pitch dark room. We are in pitch dark area. We have no idea what is in front of us. Ignorance. 2, when there is a little light, little knowledge or half-baked knowledge, we can sense, oh, there are 2 trees in front of me, but I am not able to make out what kind of trees they are. But I can make out 2 trees are in front of me. Even that knowledge, half-baked knowledge, is of no use. But when there is enough light, we can now make out, oh, that's an apple tree and that is a mango tree. Knowledge dawns within. When light is there, we can make out, oh, that is an apple tree, that is a mango tree. Now think, what if the light intensity increases all the more? It becomes very intense. When light intensity really increases, then what happens? We are now stopping to see the mango tree or the apple tree. All we see is just light coming onto us. That is again a state of being blinded. But here we are not blinded because of ignorance or darkness. Here we are blinded because of wisdom. The light, basically when you see a mango tree or apple tree, what happens? All we are seeing is light falling on the mango tree, and that which reflects onto us, we recognize that is apple tree. We recognize that is mango tree. But the light becomes so much, we see only light. We don't see mango tree or apple tree anymore. That is the state of realization, wherein I don't see he, I don't see she. I just see the soul in them, the light in them, right? So when we have so much light, the ultimate wisdom dawn, then what happens? We are again in a state of being blinded because we cannot discriminate between things and people. So when you say vidya also makes you blind, I was going to put it forth like that, because when we are in that state of thinking of only the supreme, everything seems like supreme. There is no Ramanandamrita who came to meet me. Oh, I did not meet John. I did not meet Peter. I did not meet the dog called Roger. All I met was the Supreme. All I had an experience was with the Supreme. And that's what Amma says she experiences. Every person who comes for darshan, Amma just sees the Supreme in them. That's why it is not a daunting task for her. She doesn't get tired, is what Amma says. So that ultimate state, we all become blinded in that supreme state. So that kind of links us to this very verse. When we are always established in that thought of the supreme. In Indian tradition, we are taught to see God in everything. That's how it is designed. See, try to make every thought of ours, every word of ours, every action of ours dedicated to the supreme, or dedicated, associated with a divine thought. That way that action becomes meaningful in nature. Least would there be negativity in it. The Taittiriya Upanishad talks about Atithi Devo Bhava. Matra Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Atithi Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava. Says Matra Devo Bhava. Mother is God. Pitru Devo Bhava. Father is God. Atithi Devo Bhava. An unannounced person, a guest, is God. Treat him as God. Acharya Devo Bhava. The preceptor, the teacher. Treat the teacher as God. Treat everyone and everything as God. The various Puranas talk about how Rama, Krishna, Vishnu, they were all incarnations of the divine. Even the Puranas talk about how air is divine. We have Vayu Deva. Water is divine, Varuna Deva. There is Indra Deva, god of rain. Earth, there is Bhumi Devi. Mother Earth is divine, God. Monkey god, Hanuman. There is elephant god, Ganesha. Everything you see around should be associated with the divine. That way what happens? Our attitude towards each of these is going to be different. I remember right from young age, my biological mother, and later in the ashram too, I was taught when you wake up, you do your prayers thanking the divine that I am able to wake up, first of all. Then you bow down to Mother Earth. We touch Mother Earth or the floor, and then you touch your forehead, prostrating to Mother Earth for thanking her for bearing our weight, bearing our burden. And then, the book is God, Mother Saraswati. The money or any kind of wealth that you deal is Mother Lakshmi. Everything we associated with God. That way we treat them with respect. We treat the book with respect. In case you drop a book, you drop a pen, or you stamp on a book, immediately you touch the book and then you touch your forehead, apologizing to the book, because you see divine in that. So the moment we associate something with divine, we automatically, our attitude towards that changes. Talking about paper, a piece of paper you stamp on, I remember my mom used to teach me, you should apologize to it, touch your forehead. Every Indian, I guess, faces this situation when you come to the West for the first time. You go to the bathroom, you have to deal with tissue paper. And paper is Mother Saraswati. How can I use Mother Saraswati for all these purposes? Is it a thought literally every Indian faces. But thinking about logically, in India, you use water. Water is also Varuna Deva. So you cannot say this is better, that is better. But, you just associate all these different things with divine, and that automatically changes our attitude. That's why we have 330 million deities in the Indian tradition, so that we see as many things or associate as many things around us as God, as divine. I remember it would be very common to see a person who is, late for work in India, and he gets on his two-wheeler, on his motorbike or a scooter, and then somehow trying to go through the crowded street. And then there is this, in India, it's so common to see cows on the street. And there's a cow standing right in the middle of the road, blocking his way, and he doesn't shout at the cow, rather he does, kind of does a pranam to the cow. In spite of all that agitation, that impatience that he has to get to work, he reveres the cow just because he was taught cow is divine, Gomata. So that is the whole idea. When you think of divine, associate everything with divine, automatically our attitude is going to change. When our attitude changes, we become beneficial to others and we become beneficial to our own self. And when we become beneficial to others and our own self, what would be the consequence? Happiness. Happiness, happiness, and only happiness. Such a person would nandati, nandati, nandatyeva, would rejoice, and only rejoice. I remember a few years ago in Toronto, as Amma was about to leave for the airport, after the program was over, Amma was leaving for the airport in the evening. Before that, she would typically call the monastic disciples to the room, and we get to spend some time with Amma. And in that discussion, I was just talking with Amma, and I mentioned to Amma, looking back in life, looking back at my life, right from young age, I've had all these petty desires. I want to do this with Amma. I want to have this chance with Amma. I want to drive with Amma. I want to fly with Amma. I want to drive Amma. I want to travel with Amma in the camper. I want to sing with Amma. I want to play harmonium with Amma. I want to sit on the left side with Amma, where Swamiji sits and sing. And you have all these petty desires. And with Amma's grace, Amma has satisfied all these petty desires. My only prayer to Amma would be that I don't have such petty desires anymore. Rather, I should have the highest desire. Amma said, Amma is definitely happy you think like that, but you need to ask yourself, who is putting forth, or what is putting forth this question? Is it your mind, your brain? Is it your intellect that is putting forth this, or your heart? If it is your heart, it is fine. If it is your brain, then you need to revisit that. Because when it comes from our heart, it is something we have already imbibed, something that we can easily translate into action. If it is from your brain, you may have to think about it. And Amma says, since you have grown up in the ashram, you are used to being around Amma, having these petty desires is fine to some extent, as long as it is bound by Amma. And because these little petty desires would give you happiness. And because you relate it to Amma, it gives you happiness. And even in case these desires are not satisfied, you still relate them to Amma, you won't become sad. When we stop relating it to Amma, during Amma program, I want Amma to talk to me. Some of us may have felt. And Amma didn't talk to us, and we get very angry. And so many satsangs people mention about that. They say, I got very angry at Amma. That is because we stop associating that experience with Amma. That's why we start getting angry. It takes us to negativity. But as long as the desire is not satisfied and you're still associating it with Amma, it will not lead you to negativity, is what Amma mentioned to me. So have that desire, have that feeling of Amma in all these little things. That will make life more colorful for you. So don't become very Vedanti kind of, wherein you think only with brain. I want supreme and only supreme. Don't make life dry. Rather, have a little bit of this moist, have a little bit of this color in life and associate it with Amma. That way, you would always find happiness. So, when we associate things with divine, we can find happiness, is the point Amma was trying to make. So as we keep our focus on Supreme, Amma, or a particular deity that we are dedicated to or that we relate to, our attitude automatically changes. An example, a few years ago, I think it was many years ago, about 2009, during the North American tour, I used to frequently go to the kitchen to help with the pot washing during that tour. And I remember this young boy, an Ayudh member, he would very dedicatedly clean this huge pots. And I was quite impressed with how he would look into every little detail, make sure the pot is really clean. Sometimes there's a huge pot with, sometimes after this cooking, big cooking happens, a lot of things just stick. There will be this very stubborn stains and things on the pot, and in a hurry you may tend to forget about it. But he was making it a point, he would clean it spick and span. So I was telling him, looks like you have a lot of experience doing dishes. I guess you do a lot of dishes at home. That's what makes you a professional dishwasher here. He says, at home, I never wash dishes. I hate doing that. And then I was asking him, how come you're doing it here? He says, I don't know. When I am on tour, I just love doing it. But when I'm at home, even when my mom asks me to wash a small spoon, I would just find some reason or the other, just put it in the sink, throw it in the sink, and just not wash even a little spoon. So when they are in Amma's presence, or when they dedicated the same action to Amma, washing a spoon becomes so difficult for him at home, but washing a huge vessel that you climb into that vessel and clean it, as big a vessel. You climb into it and then you scrub it. That big a vessel. He just enjoys doing that. Where is a little spoon and where is this huge vessel that you can sit inside? So what helps him do that? Associating it with Amma. Associating it with a deity, a person, a supreme, a being who you revere a lot. And that brings in a change in the attitude. And because it brings in the change in the attitude, everything becomes pleasant and a pleasant experience. And in a tour, however difficult Amma tours are in terms of doing seva, materialistically looking at it from comfort point of view, it is not a very comfortable, materialistically great experience. But everyone just rejoices. And the last day of the tour, invariably so many people, tour staff especially, just cry. It's as if I just want to do more and more of the seva, though from an outside point of view it looks like a lot of work. Why? This very attitude, nandati, nandati, nandatyeva. People just rejoice. In spite of every kind of experience during the tour, you just rejoice. You just rejoice, completely rejoice. That's the whole point that this verse is making. When you fix yourself onto your beloved deity, every experience, however great it is, however otherwise it is, however great it may seem, or however otherwise it may seem, however pleasant it may seem, however otherwise it may seem, however spiritual it may seem, or however materialistic it may seem, you would still only rejoice if your mind is fixated on the divine. And here, that's basically what I wanted to discuss as part of what this verse is pointing out. I hope it makes sense. Makes sense? Made sense to you? Made sense to you? But here the term used is Brahmani. Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chittam. One whose mind is focused on Brahman, the supreme Brahman. So we'll just quickly discuss about that term. Brahman, when you say, we have definitely Rama, Krishna, and all these various forms. Devi, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Ayyappa, Ganesha, Shiva. But the Supreme is considered beyond all these forms. Like in Ganesh Chaturthi, if you attended the Ganesha festival we had, in the very end we immerse the Ganesha into water. The significance of that is We focus on the form, learn everything, the significance of the form. Every aspect of Ganesha has a teaching, a spiritual teaching. We imbibe all of that and eventually dissolve that form into the infinite and focus on the infinite water, is what the significance there is. And that's what literally all the religions in the world point to, the divine being formless, one who is beyond. In Sanatana Dharma, the terms like Achintya, Avyakta are all used. Achintya, one that cannot be comprehended, that cannot be thought about or cannot be comprehended. Or Avyakta, that which is not that which is not perceivable, that which is unclear. The supreme is like that. We call it as Nirguna Brahma, Saguna Brahma. Nirguna Brahma, the aspectless supreme. Saguna Brahma, the supreme with aspects. All these various forms of the Mahatmas that we revere, they're all with qualities. We imbibe those qualities and then go beyond the form alone and focus on those qualities. So rather than the trunk of Ganesha teaches us, a trunk of an elephant can lift and uproot a huge tree. At the same time, it can pick a little grain of rice. That is the ability of the trunk. So we should be able to focus on bigger picture, at the same time focus on every little detail, is what the trunk teaches us. So we should not hold on to the trunk, rather we should hold on to what the principle the trunk teaches us. So that's the whole idea here. That's why in Lalita Sahasranama we discuss the name Om Murtaye Namah, one who is with a form, and then Om Amurtaye Namah, one who is without a form. So the whole idea is we need to go beyond. But at the level that we are, we do need a form to understand things. And we have discussed this so many times. Like when you say think of sweetness, we cannot think of sweetness unless and until we think about a cookie or corn or sugar or honey or some such. We need a form. But as we experience sweetness more and more and more and more, eventually we can at least start thinking of sweetness without the cookie. Or at least when we say sweetness, we don't limit our understanding just to a cookie. We know sweetness is beyond. So that's where we need to get to. So we definitely should start with these forms that we relate to. Start with Amma, start with Rama, Krishna, whoever, whatever you relate to the most. But then eventually don't get limited there. Go to Brahman, which is what Rama, Krishna, Amma really represent. What Amma really is. Like Amma says, I mentioned earlier, don't just get bound by the 5 feet Amma. Get bound by the real Amma. So that is what Brahman is. So the term Sat Chit Ananda, Sat Chit Ananda, Sat, the supreme truth, the unchanging truth. Chit, consciousness. When we become conscious of that unchanging truth, we experience only Ananda. We experience only bliss. So that's what Sat Chit Ananda, the term Satchidananda represents. So hopefully we can associate all that we do with Supreme. We can associate it with Amma. That way everything we do, we think, we speak will become meaningful. Or at least associated with any of these 330 million forms. That way our attitude would be different. That way we make our life much more meaningful and helpful for others. And that way we benefit our own self. So it's exactly 8:30. We will conclude it here. Are there any some comments? Every time I see the comments after the session is over. The email you need to send is MACenterEC, so you already responded to that. Okay, so we'll conclude today's discussion. It's 8:30, so should we chant? Because it's already 8:30. Maybe we'll keep the chanting for the next week. Pardon? Okay, so we have bhajan evening tomorrow, so there was a suggestion, save your voice for tomorrow. Okay, so let's conclude. Sincerely praying to the Almighty that every being in the creation is happy, content, and peaceful. Let's chant the Shanti Mantra together 3 times. Om Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo. โ Om Shri Gurubhyo นะมะ Hari Om. โอม Shri Gurubhyo นะมะ Hari Om. โ Om 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 Shri Gurubhyo นะม